Welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast, exploring the inner reaches of the heart and mind, brought to you by Germany-Austria, Germany-Austria, and your host, Eric Solomon.
Welcome back to the Kind Heartfulness podcast, where we explore the path of living with an open heart and a wise mind. Today, we're exploring the intersection of two worlds that, at first glance, might seem miles apart: the high-stakes world of professional acting and the ancient profound path of Vajrayana Buddhism. Our guest today is actor Juri Henley-Cohn. You may recognize him from his work across film, television, and theater, most recently as Shimon in the series The Chosen. But beyond the screen, Juri has spent years as a dedicated student of Patrok Rinpoche, navigating the complexities of Tibetan Buddhist practice. And he's especially focused on radical transformation, using every aspect of daily life from fatherhood to film sets as a tool for waking up. He's a father, an entrepreneur behind the mindfulness app Savor, and a leader within the Samye Institute in the United States. Today, we're diving into how the performance of an actor and the practice of a Buddhist actually reinforce one another, and how we can all find a sense of the sacred in the middle of our messy modern lives. So now join me in welcoming Juri to this episode. Juri Henley-Cohn, welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I was really looking forward to this because we've never had an actor on our show. And actually, you're not just an actor. You are a professional actor, but also a serious Dharma practitioner. And I was hoping we could talk about today, how do you find acting informs your practice and how practice informs your acting? What do you think?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll apologize that you weren't able to get Richard Gere. I'm like the poor man's Richard Gere here, and I'm like the pinch hitter.
Yeah, I think he really wanted to be on the podcast, but I couldn't make my schedule work. So we'll keep at that one.
Yeah, well, and maybe he'll see me flounder, or he'll hear me flounder here, and then he'll decide he has to come in and give you a different episode, a better episode. But I'll do my best to tackle this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think that my acting and my Dharma practice very much inform each other. And in many ways, now they're very integrated. But that's not how it began. And I would say that honestly, I think the struggles I was having in my acting career at the outset are some of the reasons that initially propelled my interest in the Dharma in the first place. So there's this interesting feedback where my acting is one of the elements. It's not the only one, but one of the elements that led me to the Dharma. And then the Dharma totally upended everything I thought about my life and about acting. And then they've found a way to sort of meld together in a way that is very helpful for me and very satisfying in terms of my creative process and my Dharma practice.
Well, that's great. But I'm curious then, how would you say your entry into Buddhism upended everything you thought you knew about acting?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I remember when I was in New York. You're familiar, I'm sure, with Headspace and Calm and all these like meditation apps,
Yes.
And one of them, I can't remember which one, was like running an ad campaign in the subways. And it was like images of like weightlifters and, they had their headphones in and it would say things like, I meditate so that I can crush it.
Yeah.
So it's the way in which meditation has kind of been co-opted sometimes by society as yet another thing to help us play our ego game even better.
Yes.
To win at that endeavor.
Actually, I think it's one of the biggest obstacles now when I teach newcomers about meditation. Germany-Austria has a weekly drop-in meditation. And when I'm there, oftentimes they ask me if I'll take over, or also I do teach introductory. And it used to be that people would come and knew nothing about meditation. Now, almost everybody thinks they already know how to meditate. And the way that they're meditating is what I would say is something completely antithetical to Buddhist meditation, which is they're trying to have a good meditation experience and avoid a bad one, which is, we know that's kind of like the basis of samsara. That's how samsara, this cycle of dissatisfaction worse, so we're all enmeshed in, keeps happening, is because we're trying to avoid the stuff we don't want, and we're desperately trying to create the things that we do want with a lot of attachment. So yeah.
But I don't think it's a terrible place for people to start.
No,
because that's where they sometimes are.
Yeah, and let's face it, if the whole world did mindfulness-based stress reduction, for example, or I don't know, maybe even headspace. I really don't know that much about it. Probably the world would be a better place. I'll say that
for sure.
Yeah,
that is sort of my view on it as well, and it's why I'm wary of the when people talk about Nick mindfulness, but at the same time, I think some is better than none. And
I'm sorry. I think I have a similar reaction to that. Nick mindfulness is almost McMindfulness itself or something. But anyway, I shouldn't go on too much. It's an old friend that claims to have invented that term. I don't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a good one. But so, I was a young actor, and I mean, I think I always had certain spiritual interest, and I think that my karmic connections to the Dharma obviously go back lifetimes. I realize that now, and we could talk about and go through some of how that unfolded for me and developed. But when it really started to kind of connect for me is that, I was an actor. I wasn't getting enough work. I was struggling with my nervous system in auditions. It's a high pressure situation. There's a specific outcome that I want, and yet the craft itself is connected to being present and alive in my body and listening and attention and focus and relaxation. So, it was like this big jumbled mess that brought me to meditation at the beginning, in order to improve my performance, in order to relax more, in order to audition better. But then it began to answer and support deeper questions and deeper longings, and upended all of that for me. And even, I think, upended, or I should say recalculated maybe, the very reasons I was in acting in the first place. That's what I mean by it upended my life, for the better. A lot of it has to do with motivation, and once I became clear, don't get me wrong, I still struggle with these things, but acting it's such a magnifying glass for all of the ego games. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm shooting something, they fly me first class. There's people there that help me do this, get me a water. You know what I mean? People want to talk to you about something. But then when you're not working or you're auditioning, it's like you can be a commodity. You can be dropped for something. You can be mistreated. So it's a very strange up and down roller coaster of
you're a star one minute, you're a bum the next.
Yeah, exactly. And also your self, I'm putting that in air quotes because I know we're audio only.
Yes.
But your self, or what you imagine that to be, is both your instrument and the musician as an actor. So there's a lot that gets personalized about these types of reactions that people have. Meaning, like, if they don't like your work, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm worthless.
Yes.
I'm no good.
Yes. I can see how that would be.
Yeah. Or, they love my work. I'm amazing. I'm so great, and both of them are bullshit. And, through my meditation practice, you begin to see through that charade But then there's still something left where now you can perform for the benefit of the audience, the shared communal experience. I mean, some of my most important and most fundamental and most foundational spiritual experiences happened in a theater, whether that's a live play or a movie theater.
Wow.
Those were my first experiences of something, I would say, transcendent, something communal.
Well, so maybe this is a good place to ask you then. So, how did your career as a professional actor inform your practice?
Well, I think to talk about that, we have to talk about sadhana a little bit.
Okay, we're going to go there. Shall I say something about what sadhana is, maybe? In case some members of our audience may already just the word itself down.
Okay, then definitely, please do. And listen, you're more an expert on this than I am, but in order to answer that question, I do have to talk about it.
So. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So in Vajrayana Buddhism, which Tibetan Buddhism, the kind that we practice at Rangjung Yeshe Gumde, all the different Gumdes, but in Germany-Austria center there, there are many practices where you visualize yourself as a Buddha and the world around you as a Buddha realm. And this isn't exclusive to Vajrayana. As it turns out, visualizing is also explained in Mahayana. Many Vajrayana students don't know this, but I would say, generally speaking, visualizing a Buddha realm is found in Mahayana. Pure Land Buddhism, for example, they visualize the pure realm of Amitabha. And or if you read the classic Shantideva, Way of the Bodhisattva, there's a lot of instruction about visualization there. So then, but visualizing yourself as a Buddha is something that's particular to the inner Vajrayana practices. And when we say sadhana, I think you're probably talking mostly about those. Am I correct? Yeah. Okay. So here we are, and if it comes up, I can say more about it. But I just give people an idea is that your meditation object, if you will, when you do shamatha, or just normal meditation practice, the most common thing done today is you feel your breath going in and going out, and you place your attention lightly on the sensation of breathing. Here, the meditation object is your visualization of a Buddha and the realm that the Buddha is within. Okay, so that's the cliff notes.
The frame.
Yeah.
Framing.
The really essential version. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's super well articulated and thoughtful, and it's still helpful today for me to hear these things. And I'd say that the way that ties in to the question that prompted this, in many ways, you just answered it, because when you visualize, you are, and I'll use acting terminology here now, you are rehearsing a different worldview. You are rehearsing a different embodied experience. That is my job as an actor. When I'm playing, right now I'm on this show and I play a somewhat well-known Second Temple rabbi. So 2,000 years ago. So to really play a role like that, you need to know what that individual's cultural milieu was at the time. How did they view other Jews? How did they view non-Jews? How did they view women? How did they view their body? How did they view sex and ritual and concepts like God? How did they view the temple, right?
Lennon?
And
Can
so
you
when
say
you're
the name of the show? I think you should plug your show here.
It's called The Chosen, and it's about Jesus and his disciples. And it's available in the United States, at least, on Amazon Prime. And it's interesting because, in some of the chattering class, not everybody watches it, but globally, it's one of the most popular shows in the world. And
Wow.
I feel very, I mean, people say this, but I mean it. I feel humbled and very honored that I get to be a small part of it.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's certainly, part of being an actor, I suppose, would be you want to do something that is well received and people like and they watch. So congratulations. That's great.
Thanks.
You really.
And has an impact. I mean, believe it or not, I think the older you get in life, if you stay in this field, it's something you start to care about is you want things that really touch people. And
Sure.
From a Buddhist perspective, deepen their wisdom and compassion. I mean, that's the goal.
But okay, now let's pop this back and go back to how this, you were saying about
how they relate.
Yes, how you become this person and
Right.
really embody this person.
Right.
Right.
And so as an actor, everything you're doing and studying, right? The words on the page are just a clue. They're a doorway in. Your job is to bring the life, not just to memorize the lines. And that means everything from the way the person looks to the way that they speak, to the way that they view the world around them and the relationships that they have to every single person, place, object, and event around them. So my training as an actor was already dealing with visualization practice. And so when I came to sadhana, it was the most obvious way for me to understand it. Another common analogy that people use is, it's not perfect, but you can look at a sadhana like a recipe. You know what I mean? It's a recipe for how to become a Buddha oneself. Or I like the analogy of it, in many ways, it is like a script from birth to death, including the activities. And so you spend time cultivating that, I want to say, not just understanding, not just compassion, not just wisdom, but ideally that very experience. And when acting is going well, which is the thing that we're always pursuing, and we see our footage later and are mortified, but we are truth tellers. People like to joke about actors being good liars and faking things, but really what good acting is truth telling. And you begin as an actor to see through your own storyline. Oh, Juri is this. These are the things that Juri likes. But then when I perform, you see that you can put on a completely different persona, completely different tastes, completely different likes or dislikes. So you begin to see how porous that is. And that is the same experience that I get from sadhana practice. And so in the end, both have hollowed out my fixation and grasping to who and what I view Juri as.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm freer to connect more frequently and more often to deeper and healthier, I guess, Vajra pride, or dignity, as Patrick Rinpoche likes to call it, which is
dignity
not the same.
Great. I like how he uses the word dignity. I think that first, maybe we should say, what is Vajra pride or dignity? It's that we're actually trusting, fundamentally, deeply, profoundly trusting that our nature and Buddha's nature are not different. They're not to say that everything's one, meaning it's where our nature is just as good or just as bad or however you want to say it, as Buddha's nature. That there's, and that really when you visualize yourself as a deity, and visualize is a funny word. They actually, it's Charan or Charan, depending on your accent. It's more like you're creating, like what you said, it's not just appearing as, it's you become. Not just the Buddha, but the whole environment, everything. It has the feeling, the touch, the taste, the smell, the atmosphere, if you will. It's actually more important than when you get all the details of the visualization right. And that what you begin to see is we're already doing a sadhana. We're doing the samsara sadhana. We're practicing it every day, day after day, countless lifetimes, practicing and believing there's a me, and it's like this, and it's not like that, and it's separate, and like that, on and on and on and on. And so, so when we're practicing, maybe one good analogy, because in Mahayana Buddhism, general Mahayana Buddhism, you practice the six perfections: generosity, patience, diligence, and so forth. These different activities of a bodhisattva. And of course, in the beginning, you're not really generous, but you practice generosity, and you have no patience, but you practice patience. And through this, through three aeons or some incredibly long time, you actually become fully awakened. First you become a first level bodhisattva, and then a second level bodhisattva, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of fake it till you make it. So here in Vajrayana,
it's rehearse it until you get better.
Yes. Yeah, that's
which I like better than fake it till you.
I was going to bring it back to that. That's right. That's what I was going, this whole diatribe. Exactly. It's beautiful, Juri. Thank you. So yeah, so you're actually rehearsing this way of being. Actually, we are that way already, but we don't seem to believe it. And this is what dignity is about, and what Vajraprad is a more technical term. It's not an ego kind of I am special, but it's a quiet confidence in the true nature of how things are. Mm-hmm. Okay. So,
well said.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I said it. At least I said it.
You said it well.
Yeah, thank you. So anyway, this is beautiful. I see the analogy you're trying to make. It's really an important one. It's this rehearsing. We're rehearsing. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, we get better and better and better. Wow.
Yeah. And, sometimes I think practitioners, and now I'm speaking about Buddhist practitioners, Vajrayana practitioners, sometimes it's hard for us to assess our progress. We think, are we really progressing? If maybe I'm just chanting this sadhana, or I'm reading this sadhana, but I like to encourage myself and others to, when you view it in this rehearsal way, I know that when I begin a production, let's talk about a stage production now, I show up with a script in hand. I don't know the other actors. I don't know anything. And day one. And then a month later, we're doing a live show in front of a paying audience. So rehearsal and practice absolutely change you and make progress. I mean, just going to the gym is another great analogy. Like, if you work out for a month straight, you're going to look different. You're going to feel different. If you work out for a year straight, it gets even stronger. And so every avenue of our life, you look at musicians playing scales, and it's what you said before. We are always practicing anyway. We are practicing whatever it is we habitually do. And if we are habitually angry and habitually neurotic, then that's what we're practicing, even when we think we're not practicing. And so through Buddhist practice, just by trying to apply some intent and application and aspiration toward these, I guess, virtuous outcomes, maybe, I know that improvement is happening. I see it in my friends, I see it in my colleagues, I see it in other Buddhist practitioners, and I see it a little bit in myself. Maybe I wish the progress was faster.
We all do.
Yeah. But there's no doubt that it works, because I know it from my profession, and that's how they've become unified now for me, because my Dharma practice helps me be a better actor, and my acting helps me be a better Dharma practitioner, because it strengthens both my visualization as well as, like you said earlier, for me, it's not just the sitting on the cushion and the details. It's a much, I would call it a much richer, more embodied, more vibrant form of visualization. And I'll add one thing, and then I'll zip it, because I know I can talk too much. But
you're saying really important things. And
well, interesting thing is like when you work on stage, there's a long rehearsal process, like a month with all the other actors. But as my career shifted into, once I had kids, I sort of emphasized film and television more. And you don't have that same luxury, You prepare on your own and you show up, and you don't necessarily always know what the set is going to be and what props are going to be available. So my rehearsal process now for film and TV is almost entirely based on visualization. I will work and move in the space, and I will try on costumes on my own to see how they make me feel. But then I will have to just sit and visualize all the details of the set that I imagine it will be, even if it will be different when I arrive. What props? That's how I'll know even what props to ask the prop master for. I would like a cane here, or I want eyeglasses, or I want rings, and it's because I've already spent the time visualizing that as part of how the performance will unfold. But then, of course, as an actor, you do that, but then you also just have to let it go. And it's connected to spontaneous presence, You've now done this homework and done this rehearsal, and now you got to let it rip here and now in this very moment. And that is both thrilling and terrifying.
Who's terrified?
Oh, great question. That's the version that I talked about where I started, because it's still there. The version that's terrified is the one who wants to do a good job, who wants to get paid, who wants to get rehired, who wants to not screw up the...
Sorry. The reason I asked you is because I found it really interesting, and actually honestly a bit inspiring, is you said that through acting, you begin to see the self as much more porous. And I would suspect as much more what self rises, as if it was one. But what self rises independence on a whole bunch of other circumstances, like if you're acting in a particular role, there's a self that rises. If you're talking with your kids, there's a self that rises. And they're not the same self. And so,
no, they're completely contingent upon the circumstances.
So then there's a self that suddenly rises, that starts feeling insecure about how the acting went.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, that you're not acting as well because you're watching yourself, as opposed to your attention should be fully on the other person. It's a relational craft. And then, of course, through that, you realize that you and that other person are not, back to Buddhism, are not separate. There's sort of this dance that is being expressed through these seemingly separate individuals. And it can be incredibly profound for both the performer and, ideally, when it's going well, for the audience, which is what I was saying when I said I had some of these very palpable experiences in theaters when I was growing up, where all of a sudden you feel like the outside world drops away and everybody is connected in the same moment, the same breath, all connected in the same narrative, the anticipation or the climax or the denouement or whatever, or the relief. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. That's how I process it these days. And I'll say that, the Buddhist practitioners that I personally admire the most are like the real... Chogyam Nyima Rinpoche always talks about scholar practitioners. I love that, because I really admire the sort of the yogis, because that's like an actor, like you can study Shakespeare in an English class and you can read a lot about it. That is not reading. To be or not to be is not the same thing as performing it or witnessing it. And ultimately, that's what it's designed for, the experience of the play, not a book on a page. And I think the sadhana is the exact same thing. The words on the page are the pointer to the experience of being a Buddha here and now, and being of benefit to others, and viewing yourself and the world as empty and compassionate and luminous and all of that.
I think it's something that's really the biggest challenge when we first encounter this kind of practice, because it seems so foreign, so different than anything else we've done, and we're just trying to get it really right, and we're really like trying to get all the details perfectly. And it is, of course, in a way you should, but then at a certain point you have to kind of say, I'm going to play with this, just like I imagine you do as an actor. Like, yes, you have to memorize your lines, of course you do, but to really become that person, you can't be like grasping intently on each word. You have to somehow, I don't know, play with it.
Yeah.
Be it.
Well, and Bruce has this great line. I'm going to butcher it, and this is a paraphrase, but he talks about the tyranny of rhyme driving poets to the discovery of their greatest lines. So with a text of any kind, there is a structure that must be followed, but that structure unlocks infinite possibilities. It is delimiting, not limiting. The number of actors throughout history who have done to be or not to be, it's the same words, and they are drastically different interpretations and performances. And yes, there's a path that must be followed, as we say, the structure of a scene.
Mm-hmm.
But there are an infinite number of ways that one can follow that path. And that, to me, is the way to balance structure and freedom, both in creative endeavor and in Dharma practice.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Every once in a while I've watched like outtakes from a movie or TV show where you see the actor trying different approaches.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, in some cases I even wonder, well, maybe that one was better than the one they actually went with. And there could be all kinds of reasons, including something about the lighting wasn't right or whatever, to throw it away. But and I would say then it's a really great analogy for doing Dharma practice, especially sadhana, in that there isn't just one way, and every great yogi who's ever walked the path of that sadhana has done it exactly the same way.
Right.
Everybody has to find a different way to live in it, so to speak.
Well, it's liberating to hear you say that, because I think when I was first starting, I did have a lot of fear about the precision. I would fixate on the precision of like, well, is this pronounced right? And what am I, again, I'll go to the chef analogy. I was fixated on the specificity of the recipe. But that's just the beginning phase, because then you're not actually learning how to make the dish. Like, my wife's a great cook.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't follow any recipes, or even if she has a recipe, she doesn't measure anything.
Wow.
Because she knows how much salt she wants in the soup. And maybe one day it's this much salt. She's not like, whereas I'm taking a measuring spoon and leveling it with a magnifying glass because the recipe said.
Yeah. With some things, certain kinds of, like making bagels, it turns out that's really important, because you can't get a good bagel where I live in France. Where you live, you can get a good bagel.
Yes.
So a friend of mine says, so why don't you make your own? I'd like, ding, ding, ding. So I do once in a while. But what I learned is you really have to get the measurements quite right, or the dough doesn't rise properly, and all these other problems. So I do think that maybe you have to start out tight before you come loose. Yeah, there's a great story about this one practitioner who was in the mountains and a yogi living in a cave, and another man came upon him and heard him chanting mantra, and
Oh,
he wanted to correct him. Right? You know the story.
I think I've heard a different version of it, but go
Yeah,
on.
there's
Tell
many
yours. And then
different versions. I'm going to add to that. I can't remember a particular one, so I'm just going to butcher it. But you butchered Proust. I'm going to butcher something else. So then, the man came to the yogi and said, it's not chili chilai, it's kilikilaya. It's just, I don't know anything about that. Chili chilaya, kilikilaya. I don't know anything about that. And he pulls out his purba. It's a kind of knife, you can say, and sticks it deep into the rock, which is normally would be something you would think is impossible. This I know, he says, as he puts it into the rock. So it's just showing that actually there is something else that's more important than getting every detail precisely right.
I love that. The version I heard was there was some yogi on one side of a lake, and and he was, according to this other practitioner, he was mispronouncing the mantra. So the guy went around the lake and told him and corrected him. And the yogi was like, "Oh, thank you so much. I didn't know. I've never had great education on this. Thank you." The scholar goes back to the other side of the lake. Again, he's mispronouncing it. So he goes a second time and tells him. And then he's like, "Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that." And then the yogi at one point, he starts chanting again and then he stops. And the scholar looks up and the yogi comes running across the lake on the water and says, I'm sorry, tell me again. I forgot the pronunciation again.
Yeah, that's a different story. But it's similar kind of.
Yeah, I have no idea where I'm sure it's not even correct, but
Yeah.
that's
It doesn't matter. There's the point is still pretty much the same.
Point is the same.
So, so where were we? I don't remember.
Well, you had said earlier that you wanted to return to the point about Westerners or maybe dignity, and maybe this is a good segue because
First of all, I just tell you several things. First of all, when you say Westerners' dignity is a word in English. It's nothing to do with Westerner. It's just to do with people who speak English. And even dignity as a concept, I'm pretty sure it has slightly different color to its meaning in every language that comes from Latin, et cetera, et cetera. But I think all cultures have this idea of a kind of dignity that comes from external circumstances and a kind of dignity that comes within. It exists in every culture that I know of. It exists in Chinese, it exists in Tibetan, it exists in India, in different places. It exists in many different European countries. So I don't know about dignity as being an East-West or a kind of thing. What I do think is that dignity versus Vajra pride is skillful because Vajra pride becomes very complicated and hard to understand, but we all kind of have a sense when we hear the word dignity, what that means. And we all know about the kind of quiet self-confidence of true dignity that's not based on what others think of me but it's this knowing what I know. So like in Radically Happy, we talked about a lion who has dignity. A lion has dignity. A lion doesn't have to go all through the forest saying, I'm the most ferocious beast in the forest. The lion just knows that they're the most powerful, ferocious beast. It's dignity. It's not ego. And that's the important difference. And the way we call it Vajra pride is normally pride is ego. Vajra pride is something else. And sometimes it's called Vajra confidence. Different people translate different. There's some more translations. But I find what's good about dignity as a word in English is it has people kind of already, you don't have to explain as much to understand it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But anyway, you can get into an argument with me here if you want.
No, I don't. I agree with you. And I think that, well, let me tie it in this way. And I think this will connect this thread to sadhana practice, which we've covered, which is that, because I was like this, so when I first approached the Dharma, you would have thought that ultimately, I would have thought from the outside that I would have been much more interested in the Zen tradition.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot about Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana that I actually, from speaking honestly, initially was sort of off-putting. Until I understood it better, and I was very much sort of just magnetized into the tradition. But where this connects is that a lot of, I'm going to say Westerners, because it's related to my experience, are often interested in just meditation. And it's why there's such a big draw, Westerners to wanting access to Dzogchen teachings right away. And these days they can buy books, there's a lot that's available. Yeah. And so people, myself included, was interested in that and dove into that. And
what Dzogchen book did you read before you got interested?
So, I mean, I'd read stuff by Sokni Rinpoche quite early, and Golden Letters. I mean, anyway, that's beside the point. No, we can go back to it, but the point that I'm driving at, Eric, is I don't think I would be able to even approach that type of stuff without sadhana practice, because I am still cultivating the required dignity. And it's what drove me to meditation practice from the outset, is that I was struggling with all of these things. And so for me, I can't even fathom, and I say this to Westerners all the time, because sometimes people say this, like, oh, I just want to meditate. I'm not interested in ritual. I'm not interested in sadhana.
I meet plenty of Asians that say the same thing. I think this East-West thing is made up. But
well, the East-West thing is it's not that I'm not saying it exists. I'm just saying I can't. That's not my experience as Western.
But you don't know Westerners. You know people in New York or something. I mean, it's not like you survey what is a Westerner. I'm sorry. What I think people call the West exists now in Asia too. It's a certain kind of modernity. And
okay, you're right. So I apologize. Perhaps that's the wrong word.
Everybody does this. It's one of my pet peeves. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I apologize then for that. What I mean by that is
that's not what I wanted.
What I meant is that I was closed-minded to the value of ritual.
Good.
And what I'm saying is that now I recognize that even the aspects of the Dharma that I thought conceptually were the most interesting to me, I now recognize that, at least for me, and I can only speak about my experience, that sadhana has been an integral component of how I engage with and access all the levels of teaching, if that makes any sense. So that's how I was trying to sort of tie up that.
Sure. I think that it's understandable. Like, actually, I'm the opposite of you. I don't know opposite exactly, but if it wasn't for encountering Dzogchen teachings when I was quite new, I don't think I would have been that interested in practicing sadhana.
Oh, I agree with you. That's not the opposite. That's what happened to me as well.
Well, no, because I didn't ever have a rejection of it. It's that I met when I met Dujin Rinpoche, I mean, I simply couldn't believe a human being could be like that. I mean, just walking into the room with him, my mind was different. Actually, he didn't teach so much at that time. I mostly got bonked on the head, blessing of some sort. But it's...
that propelled you to be eventually interested in learning about sadhana.
Very quickly, not eventually. Not eventually, quickly.
Well, no, I'm with you. What I meant, so I had started studying Buddhism and was not interested. And then I was like, I want to meet authentic lineage holders.
Yeah, exactly.
And then once that happened, then I was immediately interested in sadhana.
Yeah. Then I
But,
went,
but
I actually felt I would have left Buddhism if I hadn't, I think I would have left if I hadn't met to religion, because I felt like I just didn't understand the main form of practice. I understood something intellectually and peace is just using logic and reasoning as a computer programmer, so I could do logic and reasoning. But as far as experiential understanding, I felt like zilch. And I thought I have to meet someone like Juri Rinpoche actually passed away quite soon after I met him. So I had to meet a master who comes to spiritual maturity before the Cultural Revolution, and Sanya had been writing me, come to Nepal. So I did.
that's always an interesting, maybe you can talk about that for a sec, because I'm always trying to juggle. Well, I have friends, certain friends that I'm like, this person would really love this, but I don't ever want to be an evangelizer. And so I'm always trying to navigate that, like certain friends being like, dude, you really got to come to this thing. You're going to, and also being like, it's not mine. I don't know.
I mean, I think you have to, yes, I think that's an issue. In this case, I was practicing Tibetan Buddhism. I was practicing Nindro and probably a bit of sadhana practice. And Nindro, by the way, for those of you listening, is preliminary practices, which do involve some visualization. But how they're different from sadhana is another subject. But in any case, so this friend wasn't really evangelizing. They're just saying, I should come to Nepal and meet her teacher. That's all. But I do think you have to be, it is tricky because we shouldn't be evangelizing. And the kind of practice I do definitely isn't for everyone. And in fact, there are many authentic spiritual traditions that are practiced in the world, and they're all good. And we should hopefully have some profound kind of humility and respect for that. But at the same time, first I go around and teach, right? And I do tell people who I think it's appropriate. For example, I recommend some people they should see Patrick Rinpoche. Other people I recommend they should see Chikyu Rinpoche. Other people I recommend they should see Zonsa Khensen Rinpoche, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And do you just get a feeling or a vibe?
Yeah.
Something from their character makes you feel like...
No, I'm probably full of it, but I at least, I got to go with what I have. So I try to be flexible and adapt to the situation and the person. I think the thing is as long as you're not painting people into a corner or expressing your enthusiasm and interest can be a good thing. I mean, and I think the main thing that people need to know is, do they understand the tradition well enough to explain it to others? And that's the tricky part, because a lot of people actually kind of don't, right? And so that you have to be careful. But I suspect I'm not putting you in that category, but I've seen it.
Maybe, I don't know, I hope.
Well, I mean, not everything that comes out of my mouth is entirely perfectly correct. And recently, Chikyu Rinpoche just taught, we had our first public teachings at the castle where we're going to...
I saw some of the footage.
Yeah. And some strange, inexplicable reason, I found that I was doing an early morning 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock session every day. And I actually, on reflection, there's a few things I'd like to edit. So I'm not going to sit here and say that everything I do is just absolutely perfect.
One thing I do whenever somebody asks me a question, I'm not in the same position you are. You actually are a teacher. So when people ask me a question, I just say, listen, I'll give you my best answer, but you need to check with a more authentic source.
Yeah. I think that's always good, even when you're a teacher. My teachers have said things like that. Yeah. I mean, really, they've said, well, I didn't practice that as well as I could have. And, and then Tuborgia would say all kinds of amazingly humble things. And then he'd give this mind blowing answer that, well, if that wasn't an expert, I'd love to meet the expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but different teachers also manifest. Some teachers manifest in a way that's seemingly very proud, but it's just a skillful means.
Yeah.
And
it's powerful. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, it's powerful.
I was going to say it's powerful that when people, I think, have that sort of non-fixation on, it's like the Rime movement and not being sectarian and having this non-fixation on your teacher, which can be a very important and powerful relationship. But anytime people think their teacher is the best one or the only one, like, I think it's very valuable that you're trying to help guide a student to the right teachers for them.
That's true.
Somebody did that for me. And I will be eternally grateful that they put a lot of time and thought and energy. And when I started to make my first deepest connections with teachers, this person didn't recommend me to their teacher, actually.
Yeah, that's true. At the same time, different teachers have different things that they're just superb at. And it's okay to say, and I do say, sometimes when I recommend, there's a couple of things that Juri does better than probably almost anyone.
Oh,
and
100%.
Yeah. And I might say that in the conversation and so forth and so on. This has been really amazing conversation. I'm wondering if you can leave us with a few thoughts now. Where do you go with all this as a practitioner, as an actor? How do you see yourself further developing your craft, shall we say?
Well, at the risk of overstepping, I would say that, because this comes from the outside, right? But I am really inspired by the Mahasiddhas. Well, right. But what I mean by that is, like, that's what I kind of aspire to be, knowing a few teachings very well. I'm never going to master, at my age, I'm never going to master the full spectrum of Buddha Dharma, even the full spectrum of the Choling Tersar, or even of Vajrayana Buddhism. But maybe I can make some progress on a few key, authentic practices and integrate them in my daily life, and especially also through what I would call almost the magnifying glass of my profession. That the more that I integrate that, it becomes a unified path of practice, so that my whole life becomes my sadhana. Because as we said at the outset, our life is already like a sadhana, but it's distracted and dissipated. And when I can confused, yeah. So my aspiration, beyond trying to be of benefit to others, but my aspiration for myself as a practitioner, is to engage with my life and my profession in an unconfused way, one imbued with wisdom and compassion and dignity, ideally, and that they all self-reinforce, that my life and my profession improve my practice, that my practice improves my life and my profession, and that all of those start to radiate out and are of service to others, to my family, to the audiences that I interact with. And that's where I go from here with it. And I think that's unlimited, that process of doing that and improving, and that there's no cap to that. So, one of my great acting teachers, one of them he always says that, destruction is easy. Creativity, like, doing something constructive for the world is both much more worthwhile, gives you a sense of purpose and direction, and is beneficial. And that he always says, flee forward. And I've always, he's one of my first great teachers. One of the first manifestations of the Buddhas for me was this acting teacher. And yeah, so I mean that's where I go from here.
That's great. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much, Juri. It was a pleasure to have you on the Kind Heartfulness podcast. And I have this secret wish that you come back again and again and again. I guess now it's not secret; everybody's heard it. So please come back.
Well, Eric, we've known each other a long time, and you've been very helpful to me over the years, and a big impact, and one of my teachers as well. I mean, I certainly consider you that way. It's a weird dynamic, actually, because I consider you like a friend, but also a teacher. So it depends on the setting and the situation.
I'm a good friend.
Huh?
I'm a good friend. I'll take it.
Yeah. And I'm thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm grateful to be here. And I would love to come back again anytime.
Okay. Well, I'm sure it'll happen again soon then. So thank you very much. And take good care.
Thanks. Be well.
Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, we like to invite you to continue the journey into the heart of enlightened mind at gomde.eu.